levels approach to unified endpoint management, and this is the security level 5 video. So this is a multi-part series where we've defined categorically maturity model levels for endpoint devices. So as I said, this one is our security level 5 overview. The agenda for this video, go through just a very brief round of introductions. We'll talk about what unified endpoint management means. We'll review from a high level the maturity model, its phases and categories. Then we'll dive into the level 5 overview. So a little bit about model. We're experts in endpoint management, security, and automation. We have two primary practices, our as a project and as a service team. We also have an IP team focused on developing solutions to fill in any of those gaps. We focus on our areas of expertise, and we're a Microsoft Gold partner. So we developed the UEM maturity model to help customers identify where they are at in their relative to other organizations and where they could be going down the road. So this is mainly used in two capacities. It's used initially to assess where you're at and to either confirm that you are on the right path or to help define what that path looks like. And so generally speaking, we didn't create these phases, but these maturity model phases are the initial phase, repeatable, defined, managed, and efficient. And so each one of these phases have different properties to them. And so just as an example, your initial phase, you're starting to realize something is needed. In a repeatable phase, you're able to get some things accomplished, but you're lacking standardization just from a high level. In a defined phase, you've got more central management tools. There's some gaps maybe in management. When you move into the managed phase, you start feeling like a well-oiled machine. You're applying configuration pre and post. Processes are there, but they sometimes require some more heavy touch than what you'd like. And then in an efficient phase, you've got a single platform for all of your endpoints. You're applying configuration dynamically, and you've got a set of analytics that are driving decisions. So what those phases apply to would be things like the categories that we created. So in the endpoint arena, the management infrastructure, things like Active Directory, Azure AD, Endpoint Manager. In configuration management, user permissions, security baselines, device provisioning and deprovisioning. In the updates and servicing management arena, monthly processes, operating system versions, testing and validation procedures. In application management, how we get applications installed, what that process looks like from an organization level, and how those apps are delivered. And then endpoint security, where we're at today, how we manage, how we report on security, what the data is doing, app containerization, risk-based analysis, and conditional access are all areas within these categories. So what the maturity model does for us, well, it helps us define graphically where we sit in a categoric view based on the phases. So what this allows us to do is say, in this example here, maybe our management infrastructure is a level 2. That's an area where we could easily get that up to a 3 to bring it up on par with everything else. From a high level, again, initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and efficient. Those are the different maturity model levels. So security level 5. First, let's talk about what level 5 means. You've got centralized tools, just like in a level 4. You've got application level management, just like in a level 4, multi-factor authentication. But when you get to the level 5, a couple other things get thrown into the mix that we typically see in organizations. A just-in-time access configuration, which we'll talk about just momentarily. And then centralized analytics, which we'll also spend some time on. So for just-in-time administration, being able to manage the users or the technicians rather that have the ability to change your environment and not giving those credentials out on a regular basis. What that means is, let's say that I'm an administrator and I want to go manage Active Directory or Azure Active Directory rather. I cannot do that without going requesting access first. Now you can certainly automate and the approvals of the activation of permissions, but it's that extra step of being able to request those permissions before you can go execute anything that can really thwart some evil attacks on your infrastructure. So using something like Privileged Identity Management, PIM, inside of Azure Active Directory allows you to set and configure access for a variety of different roles, gives you that discovery and monitor capability, and again, allows you to activate that just-in-time features. So the next piece we're going to talk about is in the level 4 video. If you watched it, we talked about these analytics of, let's say, the cloud app discovery analytics that you get. And it's great that we have insights like this, being able to see what applications are being used in our organization and what applications are accessing what kind of data. And then again in Defender 365, looking at the different users, their compliance, how that looks on a scoring chart, using something like our secure score to define how secure our organization is overall, right, across many platforms. Defender for Cloud, as an example, giving us a lot of insights, again, into regulatory compliance, maybe Azure virtual machines, information protection. So you're starting to see that we have all of this data from locking down our various aspects of our cloud footprint in a modern world. So when you get to that level 5 of a security level inside of our maturity model, we're looking for single source infrastructure analytics as well. So looking at things like this. So taking that data that we looked at just in the previous screenshots from the level 4, looking at that data and saying, well, how does that make sense to my administrators? And what can we do to aggregate that data down into palatable, really digestible chunks? So as an example, our Azure Active Directory plugin that aggregates data from Azure Active Directory and gives you just some high-level analytics and some searching capabilities for devices, device types, versioning, things like that. And what that allows you to do is start really getting a handle on managing your Azure Active Directory more proactively. Then we take a look at something like Intune. And while Intune has some reporting, there's a lot to be desired in how you navigate and how you find actual data that you're looking for within the reports. So something like our device management blade of our single source infrastructure analytics that allows you to not only look at how the devices are joined and if they're compliant or not, but really quickly identify why they're not compliant. And so if you've ever tried to do this inside of Intune, this is a challenge to quickly determine on a mass scale why machines are not compliant. Now, why is that important in level 5? Well, in a level 5, you want to be as proactive as possible, or at least reduce the amount of time to reactiveness by leveraging these analytics to drive these business-based decisions. So you take a look at Defender for Endpoint Blade in this. We have our Defender for Endpoint Blade tells us how many devices are in Endpoint, how many are in AD, how many are not present in Azure AD, the active devices by operating system count, how many are onboarded, how many are managed by Intune. This is difficult information to discern from those dashboards, but is very instrumental in proactively managing the environment. Being able to identify quickly what devices have vulnerabilities by any search criteria possible, whether it's computer name, username, severity, exposure, what the onboarding status of Defender is, last activity dates, etc., is really important to identify those kinds of updates that are required in your organization. So if you take a look at this piece of Defender for Endpoint Blade that I pulled up, you can now see the CVE ID matched to the Microsoft updates, matched to the details of the software that has the exposure, as well as a summary of devices missing critical updates, devices missing high priority updates, and device missing medium priority updates. You take that, and then our last blade that we have here is our Windows updates and servicing dashboard. This allows us to see over time compliance history based on the Intune patches that we're pushing out with Windows Update for Business. So again, this is all in a modern managed world, and a lot of this data is really, really difficult to find and to make a lot of sense out of very quickly. So where do we go from here? Well, the next steps would be to get a hold of us and conduct an assessment. The assessment consists of 2 90-minute sessions that we'll lead, and out of that is a finding and recommendations in a prioritized manner. Those recommendations will be listed so that you can understand how to get from one area of your maturity model to the next area, and that cost is typically $3,000. Now, those dashboards that you saw at the end there, those infrastructure analytics dashboards, have several plugins between the Log Analytics, Azure AD, Defender for Endpoint, and Microsoft Intune, you can contact those. We can certainly give you a demo of those and talk in more detail what's required to get those solutions up and running. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can be found at jason.rutherford@model-technology.com.